They say you can feel when a place is wrong. You don't always have the words for it, just that low pull in your gut, like something's waiting. I used to ignore that feeling, told myself it was nerves, hunger, imagination, but not anymore. Not after what happened in the ghost stretches of Arizona. I was 39, divorced, and tired of fighting the current. I'd sunk most of my savings into a used Volkswagen Rialta and hit the road to find what was left of myself. I wasn't running from anything. I was trying to find the version of me that hadn't drowned in office walls and broken promises. The open highway gave me a kind of silence I hadn't felt in years. It was beautiful, clean, whole. My goal that week was simple: a quiet place in Arizona. I'd found a spot online, abandoned RV park near the edge of Tonto National Forest. Locals had mostly stripped it down after it closed, but word was the place still had level lots, fire pits, and most important, no one else. When I pulled off the cracked county road and onto the gravel entrance, I noticed the sign first. Once it had said Whispering Pines RV Retreat in cheerful, faded lettering. Now it just read Wisp Pies V Re-Eat. The front office was boarded up. One shutter flapped in the dry wind like a slow heartbeat. Dust coated everything, not just the kind of dust from time, but a strange uniform coating, like the land had been holding its breath and finally exhaled. There were 6 old RV pads still visible in a horseshoe layout, each framed by crumbling concrete bumpers and rusted grills. I took the farthest pad, parked, and stepped out into a silence that felt wrong. Not quiet like peace. Quiet like someone holding a scream. I told myself it was fine, that this was just my first truly remote night, that all the comforts I'd left behind were still clinging to my bones like a film. I made a fire, cooked a simple dinner, watched the sky turn to velvet and scatter with stars. There were no other campers, no ranger patrols, no passing cars, just me, the hum of cicadas, and the whisper of wind through bone-dry branches. The first weird thing happened around 2 a.m. I woke up freezing. Arizona in spring isn't cold enough to see your breath, but I could. It fogged in the air right in front of my face. My RV heater was still running. I could hear it. I could feel it. But the air was cold, deep bone cold, the kind you don't forget. Then I heard the crunching. Footsteps on gravel, slow, steady, close. I sat up, heart kicking in my chest like it wanted out. My breath came fast. I leaned toward the curtain and peeled it back just an inch. There was no one there, but the footsteps kept coming, circling the RV, then stopping, then starting again. I waited. I held my breath so long I saw stars. Then without warning, a hand slammed against the window. Open palm, grayish skin, smeared dirt, nails too long. I screamed and scrambled back. The lights in the RV flickered, then everything stopped. No hand, no sound, just that crushing silence again. I waited until morning, didn't sleep. I watched the window until the sky turned orange. Then, and only then, did I open the door. Nothing. No footprints, no smudges, no sign anything had touched my RV. I told myself it was a dream. I hadn't adjusted to isolation, that the stress of the divorce and the loneliness were pulling tricks. But I knew better. Still, I stayed a second night. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to prove I wasn't crazy. Maybe part of me needed to face it. Whatever it was. That second night, I walked the perimeter of the park before sunset, found a rusted swing set overgrown with dry grass. One of the swings moved slightly, creaking. I told myself it was the wind. Then I found the old bathhouse, caved-in roof, door off its hinges, but inside, scrawled on the tiled wall in black marker, "They don't leave because they don't know they're dead." I froze. The handwriting looked fresh, but everything else in that building was crumbling. I backed out slowly. I didn't turn my back on the message until I hit open air again. I told myself it was graffiti, a joke, campfire lore. But that night, something changed. I was just falling asleep when I heard the voices. Not words, just whispers. Dozens of them. Close. Inside. Moving. They weren't outside the RV, they were inside. I jumped up, turned on the lights, swept every corner with a flashlight. Nothing. Then the lights cut out, then the heat went dead, then the door handle turned. I lunged, held it in place. Whatever was on the other side didn't push, didn't pull. It just twisted. Slow, clockwise, counterclockwise. I held on with both hands. My breath came in gasps. My mind screamed to run, but where? Into that darkness? Then, just like that, it stopped. The lights flickered back, the air warmed, the silence returned. But I didn't sleep, and when dawn broke, I was already behind the wheel, driving, not looking back. I didn't stop until I reached a diner 40 miles away. I must have looked half crazed, wild eyes, shaking hands. The waitress poured coffee without a word. Then, after a minute, she asked where I'd come from. Whispering Pines, I said. She froze. That place has been empty since the fire. I blinked. What fire? Back in 2009, whole campground went up. 5 trailers burned. 2 families missing. They never found the bodies. Locals say the land never cooled. They say the folks who stayed too long still walk it, still think they're camping. She paused. You didn't see anyone, did you? I shook my head slowly. She just nodded. Then you were lucky. But I didn't feel lucky. I felt changed. Because when I reached my next stop, an actual RV park, full hookups, cheery staff, I found something under my windshield, a black smudge in the shape of a hand, and scrawled into the dust of the rear window, "Come back. You left the fire burning." I didn't sleep for days after that, and that was just the beginning. There are more places like Whispering Pines, forgotten RV parks scattered across this country like bones beneath the surface. Places where the wind doesn't blow right, where the silence listens. I found another one in Oklahoma, and this time, it didn't want me to leave. 4 hours later, I crossed the state line into Oklahoma, my hands still trembling slightly on the steering wheel. I told myself I was just tired, that the smudge on the windshield had been dirt kicked up on the road, that the message in the dust was a coincidence. My mind needed to believe that, because the alternative was starting to unravel everything I thought I knew about reality, about what's possible. The RV was still running fine, though every now and then I swore I heard a soft clicking from somewhere deep in the cabin walls. Not mechanical, organic, like the tapping of fingernails on plastic. I turned the radio up, found a country station playing something old and sad, and tried not to think. It was near dusk when I saw the faded sign on the roadside. Welcome home, RV Haven. Turn right 2 miles. I don't know what compelled me to turn. The place wasn't on my route. It wasn't even in the apps I used to scout boondocking spots. But something about the name, Welcome Home, tugged at a nerve I didn't know was exposed. Maybe it was that buried desire to believe there was still a safe place, a haven. Or maybe I was just too tired to drive anymore. The road was narrower than it should have been, barely wider than the RV, and lined with trees that looked sick somehow, like they'd been drained of their color. The sun had dipped just low enough that the trees cast long shadows across the gravel, and the farther I drove, the quieter it became. No birds, no wind, no bugs. Just the crunch of gravel beneath my tires. I should have turned around. I should have trusted that small voice in my chest again. But I didn't. I pulled into the lot and immediately felt it. That same wrongness, thick as static in the air. There were remnants of picnic tables, some half collapsed, others strangely pristine as if recently used. The office was a small A-frame cabin with its front window shattered inward, the shards still lying in a neat pile, untouched by time or weather, and there were RVs, old ones, parked, silent, at least 4 that I could see, spaced in neat rows, not broken down or collapsed, just still, like they'd pulled in and never left. Their windows were all covered, every single one, blankets, cardboard, foil, whatever was inside them didn't want to be seen or didn't want to see out. I parked my RV near the entrance, engine still idling. My pulse was hammering behind my eyes. But I told myself I'd just look around, stretch my legs, and if anything felt off, I'd leave. I stepped out, the gravel crunching under my boots. The air was hot but dry in a way that made your skin feel paper thin. My footsteps echoed, oddly loud. I made my way toward the old bathhouse, this one partially sunken on one side, the roof buckling under its own weight. The door creaked open with a light touch. Inside, the air smelled like rot and bleach, like someone had tried to clean something awful and failed. And again, on the mirror, scrawled in some kind of blackened residue, "They never checked out." I turned to leave and froze. There was someone standing by the swing set. A child. Still. Watching. I blinked. Looked again. Gone. I nearly ran back to the RV, climbed inside, locked the door, and started the engine again. But it sputtered. Choked. Died. Dead silence returned, it wrapping around the vehicle like a sheet of wet canvas. Then from somewhere out there, I heard the whispering again. Different this time. Less like words, more like humming. Low, repetitive. It rose and fell like breath, like a lullaby sung under someone's breath. I gripped the steering wheel with both hands, told myself I'd wait it out, that I'd leave at first light even if I had to walk the next town for help. Then I heard the knock. Soft. Barely there. From the back of the RV. One knock. Silence. Two knocks. Long pause. Three. Like a code. I turned, every hair on my body raised. My heart was trying to hammer its way out of my chest. "Who's there?" I managed to call out, voice cracking. No answer, just that low humming, threading through the dark. I stayed awake all night. At dawn, the engine turned over on the first try. As if nothing had happened, as if the place had only allowed me to leave when it wanted to. But when I pulled away and checked my rearview mirror, I saw the swing set again. And this time, every swing was moving. Even though the trees were still, even though the air was dead. I didn't tell anyone. Not at first. Who would believe it? People already think you're a little unhinged when you sell your stuff and live out of a van on the open road. But a few weeks later, in a dusty library near the Texas border, I found an old newspaper clipping in a local history archive. 5 found dead in murder-suicide at Welcome Home RV Park, mother and children believed to be victims of deranged father. The article was dated August 1979. The same layout, the same number of RVs. The bathhouse photo had the same warped roof. I counted the names, 5. But I saw 6 swings moving, and I think I know now who the 6th was. She's still out there, watching, waiting, and I'm starting to believe these places aren't random. They call to you. When you're empty, when you're vulnerable, when you're alone. I didn't stop driving for hours after I left that place. Didn't eat, didn't drink. Just kept my eyes forward and the wheel tight in my grip, the white lines of the highway blurring under the wheels like a trance. I passed towns with names I didn't register, saw rest stops and fueling stations, but couldn't bring myself to pull in. Because the truth was, I didn't feel alone. Not in the RV, not in my own body. That night in the park had left something behind. Or maybe taken something. I couldn't explain it, but the silence in the RV had changed. It wasn't peace anymore. It was a held breath, like the space itself was waiting for something. I made it into New Mexico 2 days later. Camped in an actual state park this time, Crow's Nest Lake. Beautiful views, other campers around, a ranger station still in operation. I should have felt safe. But that night, while I was cooking in the little kitchenette, I heard the soft clink of the swing chain in my memory, and I dropped the pot. I didn't sleep. Again. 3 nights later, I was back to free camping halfway between Albuquerque and the Arizona border when I found it. The second place. I wasn't even looking for a new site. I had enough supplies, enough gas, and I'd already decided I wasn't stopping until I hit California. But the GPS flickered. Not the screen, just the voice. It stuttered. Repeated itself. Said, "In 5 miles, turn right, turn right, turn right to Hollow Pines RV Camp." But there wasn't a Hollow Pines marked anywhere. Not on the apps, not on Google, not even when I typed it in manually. And still, 5 miles later, I saw the sign, carved into old wood, faded green paint barely clinging to the grooves. Hollow Pines RV Camp, open year-round. The arrow pointed down a cracked road swallowed by tall brush and yucca. I slowed, told myself I was just going to look, just to see if maybe I was wrong, if there really was a park here and I wasn't going crazy. As I turned onto the road, the brush slapped against the sides of the RV like fingers. The air got colder the farther I went. By the time I reached the clearing, the desert sun was high above, but the entire camp was drenched in shadow. Tall pine trees, too tall for the region, I thought, loomed overhead, dense and unnaturally silent. Hollow pines. It looked like it had been closed for decades, but the grounds were pristine. No dust, no vines, no graffiti, not even bird droppings on the wooden benches. I should have left. I told myself that again, but I parked. This time I didn't turn off the engine, just sat there, watching. There was a logbook nailed to a post at the entrance. A dry erase welcome board next to it read, "Current guests 3," but the place was empty. I stepped out just to get a closer look. To prove to myself it was just an abandoned park with an old sign someone forgot to take down. When I got close, I saw the dry erase board had a name scribbled on the bottom. Guest number 3, J. Carlson, Site 14. That was my name, and I hadn't written it. I ran, turned, sprinted back to the RV, fumbled with the door handle like I was drunk, threw myself into the driver's seat, and through the windshield, I saw the camp sign had changed. It now read, "Current guests 4." I peeled out of there, gravel kicking up in a storm behind me. Drove faster than I should have, ignored every ping from the engine, every warning light. I didn't stop until I hit a diner west of Gallup and parked under the brightest street lamp I could find. I slept in the booth that night. When I came back to the RV the next morning, the door was wide open, but nothing inside had been touched, except the bed. There was a single pine cone resting on the pillow, and the scent of pine sap, thick and sweet, hung in the air. I started noticing patterns after that. The places I was drawn to, always off the map, always with names that sounded warm, comforting. Names like Welcome Home, Hollow Pines, Sunset Hollow, Old Birch Retreat, the kind of names that made you think of childhood or peace. But each one held something behind it, something older than any of us, something waiting for a door to open. I talked to a man once, months later, at a gas station in Nevada, an old RV lifer, missing 2 fingers and part of his left ear. He saw my eyes, the look in them, and asked if I'd been to the soft places. That's what he called them. Soft places in the land, boy, he told me, chewing on a toothpick, where the world wears thin and other things press up against it, hoping someone will press back. I asked him what he meant, asked him if he'd seen what I had. He laughed. A dry, broken sound. "Shh, I ain't seen anything. That's how I stayed alive." He walked away after that, but not before handing me a slip of paper. A list. Just names of campgrounds. Most of them I didn't recognize, but 3 of them I did, and one had a date written next to it, just a week away. I was heading in that direction anyway. Something in me, some rusted part of my mind, wanted to see if the pattern held, if the places on the list were really connected, or if I'd finally lost my grip on reality altogether, but deep down I already knew. They weren't just abandoned parks. They were traps, old ones, beautiful ones, waiting for wanderers who were just tired enough, just empty enough, just lost enough to hear them calling. I kept that slip of paper folded up in the glove compartment for days, glancing at it every time I pulled off the road or filled up the tank. The name that stuck out wasn't the weirdest or the most ominous. In fact, it sounded almost too plain. Dry Earth RV Site, July 11. That was it. Just a name and a date, and somehow it was enough to drag me right into it. I drove west, following the desert like it might eventually drop me into the sea. Days blurred together. My sleep was shallow, haunted by swinging chains, shrouded figures at my window, the scent of pine that never quite left the cabin. My memory started skipping too. I'd lose hours without noticing, find the fridge stocked with things I didn't remember buying, the stove burners sometimes left on. But I kept going. By July 10th, I was in Southeast California, past the Mojave, where the land turns into hard, sun-cracked silence. Not a town for miles. No gas stations, no signs of anything, until I spotted it off the side of a forgotten service road. A sun-bleached metal post, bent almost in half from rust. Dry Earth RV, private, no arrow this time, no welcome sign. Just a narrow dirt road that wound between sharp red rocks and sloped into a basin of dry, pale clay. I took the RV down it slowly, carefully, felt like I was descending into something, like the air got heavier with every 100 feet. The sky turned a strange yellow as the sun hit the rim of the basin. Then I saw it, dry earth. If the last places had felt eerie, this one felt wrong on a cellular level. Like the moment I pulled in, every instinct inside me screamed that this was a mistake I couldn't take back. The campground itself was laid out in a circle, 8 sites, perfectly spaced, surrounding a shallow pit of white sand in the center. No trees, no cover, just a steel fire ring at each site, long abandoned, some twisted or melted like they'd been in a heat too intense to be natural. But the part that stopped me cold was the other RVs. There were 7, perfectly parked, all different makes and models, some new, some older, all of them completely still. Every curtain drawn tight, all their doors facing inward, toward the pit. The 8th site, the only empty one, sat waiting like a mouth held open in anticipation. I didn't move, didn't even breathe, because now I understood. This was the place from the list. This was the trap. Whatever this was, whatever kind of thing had planned this, it had a pattern. 8 RVs, always 8. One comes in, one goes missing, one spot opens up. It was my turn. I threw the RV into reverse, tires skidding in the dust. But the moment I moved, all 7 RVs turned on. Headlights flared to life, in perfect unison. Engines silent, no sounds, just light, glaring at me from 7 angles, painting me like a prisoner in the spotlight of a search team. I couldn't move, couldn't even scream. Then the speakers in my dash crackled. Static first, then a voice, low, hoarse female. "Don't break the circle." And then every single light cut off, all at once. I gunned it backward up the slope. Rocks slammed against the undercarriage, mirrors scraped against sharp stone. But I didn't care. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. When I finally hit pavement again, hours later, I pulled over and threw up in a ditch. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Something about dry earth felt older than anything else I'd encountered. Not angry, not malevolent. Organized, like it had rules, rituals, timing. I dug the paper out of the glove box and burned it with a lighter on the edge of a rest stop outside Barstow. But it didn't help, because that night I dreamed I was back there, in the pit, alone. The sky red, the sand hot beneath my feet, and the 7 RVs surrounding me, with silhouettes moving behind the curtains, watching, waiting. And the sound that followed me into waking wasn't a scream or a whisper this time. It was a voice I recognized, my own, saying, 8 always leaves one behind. I started noticing it more after dry earth. People staring, not for long, just little moments, in a grocery store aisle, at a gas station pump. Once at a laundromat in Bakersfield, a woman folding clothes looked at me like she recognized me from a place neither of us wanted to admit existed. Her face changed in an instant, shock, then grief. Then she turned her head and left everything behind. Didn't even finish folding. Whatever I'd gotten myself into, it wasn't just following me, it was marking me. I kept driving. California was supposed to be the end of the road. I made it to the coast. Slept for 2 days in a KOA where I could see the ocean from my window. It was the first time I'd parked somewhere with other people around in weeks. Families, laughter, lights on after sunset. It felt too normal, like I was pretending to still belong to a world I'd quietly stepped out of. Then the dream came again, only this time I wasn't in the pit. I was in a narrow RV hallway, just like mine, but longer than it should have been. The lights flickered, the windows were black, and I could hear something crawling above the ceiling panels. Slow, wet, scraping as it moved, following me as I walked deeper into the vehicle. When I woke up, I had a nosebleed. There was dust in my mouth, my fingernails were packed with dirt, and on the window above my bed, someone had written in the condensation, "The next one waits." I left before sunrise. I didn't know where I was going. I just drove. Eventually, somewhere east of Fresno, I stopped to eat. Found a diner that felt too quiet, the kind of place where the jukebox is always broken and the waitress never makes eye contact. The old guy at the counter asked if I was a traveler. Not where I was from, just if I was on the road. When I nodded, he slid a napkin across the counter. 3 words, "Camp Hurrah, Oregon." He didn't say anything else. Didn't charge me for the sandwich either. I should have known better by then. I should have just turned around and driven east, found a real place to settle down, pretended none of this had ever happened. But something in me broke, I think. I didn't want to outrun it anymore. I wanted to see how far it went. Camp Hurrah sat in the northern Oregon woods, just west of Eugene. The forest up there feels too alive, too aware. Trees bend just a little too close to the road. Branches arch overhead like ribs. Light barely filters through the canopy, even in midday. The campground was barely visible from the road, just a carved wooden sign nailed to two trees, chipped and black with mold. Hurrah for campers! It was more remote than the others. No gates, no paved paths, just forest floor and silence. And in that silence, the crunch of my boots on leaves felt almost intrusive, like I was stepping into a place that didn't want to be seen. I walked the trail down into the clearing where the campground opened up, and my heart dropped. There were cabins here, not RV hookups, 8 of them, arranged in a horseshoe around a dry fire pit. The windows were boarded up, but the wood was clean, fresh, not a single nail rusted. Each cabin had a small totem nailed to the front, symbols I didn't recognize, circles with crosses through them, spirals, hands missing fingers, and in front of each cabin sat something left behind, a boot, a child's shoe, a plate, a necklace, things that felt placed deliberately. I approached the fire pit slowly. There were bones inside, not animal, long, clean, arranged like spokes of a wheel, and beneath the ashes, something metal caught the sunlight. I reached in, pulled it out, a rusted keyring. Attached to it was a tag, J. Carlson, Cabin 6. The sound of flies suddenly filled the air. I spun around, heart hammering, but nothing was behind me, just that wall of trees, watching, listening. I didn't remember walking into Cabin 6, but I blinked and suddenly I was standing in it. The door was closed. The bed was made, and there was a mirror on the far wall that hadn't been there a moment ago. It reflected me, but not the way I was. In the mirror, my eyes were completely black, and I was smiling. I ran, out of the cabin, through the trees, back up the hill, and into the RV like something was behind me. I didn't stop to look, didn't stop to breathe. As I drove away, I saw the wooden campground sign in my rearview mirror again, but this time it didn't say, "Hurrah for campers." It just, "Don't come back unless you're staying." I drove until I couldn't see straight. Didn't even check a map. Just followed whatever road took me farther away from the trees, the cabins, the black-eyed version of myself that smiled from a mirror that shouldn't have existed. I chewed caffeine pills like candy, slept sitting up in the driver's seat with the engine running. I couldn't let my guard down. Not again. But whatever had started following me back at Lost Pines, back when this whole thing began, it wasn't bound to one place anymore. It was inside the RV now. I heard it at night. Little knocks against the cabinets when I was lying still. A faucet dripping when no one had turned it on. The sound of someone walking, barefoot, across the laminate floor, slow and wet, as if they were soaked from the rain. Only there was no rain. Not anymore. I crossed into Idaho under a sky so gray it looked bruised. Thunder rumbled somewhere far off, but the weather stayed dry. I don't even remember why I turned off onto that exit ramp. Maybe it was hunger or fatigue or something more insidious. But when I pulled into a gravel lot that looked abandoned even on satellite view, I saw the sign. It was nothing more than a sheet of plywood nailed to a rusted oil drum, scrawled with black spray paint. "Welcome back." I swear I'd never been there before, but somehow the words weren't wrong. I recognized the layout, the same circle of RV pads ringed by skeletal trees, the same fire pit in the middle, this one filled with water despite the sky being dry for days, the same 8 spaces. Only now, 7 were occupied. 7 RVs, all empty looking, all turned inward, all watching. My hands started shaking on the steering wheel. I felt cold sweat bead down my back. I should have left. I should have thrown the thing in reverse and burned every bit of rubber I had to get the hell out of there. But my foot hovered over the gas pedal and didn't move. I wasn't driving anymore. I was being driven, like something had settled into my spine, gently nudging me forward. A whisper behind the ears, a push from just beneath the skin. I turned into the eighth space, parked perfectly in line with the others, and shut off the engine. Silence. I waited. I don't know how long. An hour? A day? The sky didn't change. The sun stayed pinned behind that bruise-colored haze and the light never shifted. It felt like time just stopped. Then I heard the knock, one single knock, inside my cabinet, the same place I kept the burner, the same one that should have been empty. I stood, opened it. There was a small object inside, a brass coin, worn smooth on both sides, cold to the touch. I didn't remember picking it up, didn't remember putting it there. When I touched it, something shifted outside. All 7 RVs, they opened their doors, slow, groaning on hinges that shouldn't have worked, in perfect unison, and from each a figure stepped out, not fast, not threatening, but identical, pale faces, black eyes, mouths too wide, all wearing my clothes. Not just similar, the same jacket, same boots, same patched jeans I'd been wearing for days. 7 of me, each one frozen, facing me from across the circle. I couldn't breathe, my chest locked up. They started walking forward, and I did the only thing I could think to do. I threw the coin back into the cabinet and slammed the door shut. Everything stopped, no movement, no sound. The RVs were empty again, the figures gone, but the air smelled, burned, like scorched rubber, like skin and metal that had been blackened in some ancient fire. I drove, again. I think something in me changed that day. Something subtle. It wasn't just about the abandoned parks anymore. It wasn't about ghosts or creatures or rituals. It was me. Whatever these places were, whatever darkness lived in them, it had started to mirror me. Or maybe I'd started mirroring it. I saw it in gas station mirrors now, in the way people averted their eyes when I passed, in how sometimes I'd speak and it wouldn't sound like my voice. I tried pulling off in normal places, town parks, family-run sites, but they'd always be empty when I arrived. Or worse, waiting. More signs, more symbols, more impossible moments where I lost time, where my watch stopped ticking, where I woke up parked in places I hadn't driven to. It was like the world was folding around me, closing in, like I'd become a ghost passing through roads the rest of America didn't even see anymore. Still, I kept thinking about the first place. Lost Pines. I'd gone there looking for peace, to clear my head, to figure things out after everything with Katie fell apart, after I ruined the best thing in my life because I couldn't stop running. And now I couldn't find the place, not on any map, not on GPS, not even in forums that used to mention it. It had vanished. Or maybe I had. It wasn't until I hit New Mexico that I started dreaming of Katie again. Not memories, not old fights or longing. These were different. I saw her walking into a place I hadn't yet been. Dry, cracked dirt, low brush, a sky as wide as forever, and a sign that said something strange, Eden's Lot, last camp before the divide. In the dreams, she didn't speak. She just kept walking away from me, always just a few steps ahead, always looking back with eyes full of disappointment, like I hadn't saved her, like I still wasn't listening. I asked around about the place. Truckers, park rangers, roadside fruit vendors. Most said they'd never heard of it. But one guy in a beat-up Tacoma outside a feed store in Truth or Consequences gave me a look I'll never forget. He didn't speak at first, just lit a cigarette, glanced up at the sky, and said, "Some campgrounds aren't places, they're memories, echoes that catch the wrong kind of soul. You go out there and you better bring something worth trading." I asked him what he meant. He didn't answer. He just got in his truck and drove off, his brake lights never turning on. I found the turnoff an hour later, no signs, just a break in the landscape, a narrow trail leading across sun-baked clay, past dead fences and petrified fence posts. I followed it until the RV started to protest, engine hot, brakes grinding like teeth, and then, like it had risen out of the heat itself, I saw it. Eden's Lot. No gates, no amenities, just 10 stone circles in the dirt, each one about the size of a small RV, spaced perfectly apart like a giant had drawn them with a compass. And in the center, a fire pit. But this one wasn't filled with wood. It was filled with mirrors, shattered, burned around the edges. Dozens of them, piled like bones, reflecting a sky that was no longer the right color. I parked. I don't know why. I don't remember turning off the engine or stepping outside, but the wind was hot. The silence was total. And the ground beneath me didn't feel like desert. It felt like memory. Heavy. Buried. Alive. I walked to the mirrors, and in each reflection, I didn't see myself. I saw Katie. Not how she was when she left, but how she looked when we first started out. Laughing, bright-eyed, sitting in the passenger seat on our first trip together, pointing out constellations through the sunroof. The kind of image you don't realize is perfect until it's gone. And then one by one, the mirrors cracked. Not from heat, not from pressure, from inside. And when I looked down into the fire pit, I saw them. All the others, the faces, the copies, the ones that had followed me through cabins and RVs and dreams and dry wells. They weren't ghosts. They were memories made wrong. Twisted versions of everything I'd done, every choice I hadn't made right. And Katie? She was there too. But not her body, her absence. It clung to the air like smoke, like she'd been erased in pieces, and the only thing left behind was the guilt. The way I couldn't follow her when she needed space. The way I'd kept driving even when I should have turned around. The way I buried every emotion inside until all I had left was this road and these camps and a curse I couldn't name. That's when I understood. The abandoned RV parks? They weren't abandoned. They were built for people like me. People who'd driven too far into their own past. People who carried something too heavy to drop. These weren't haunted places. They were containers. Old American traps made to catch regret, burn it into the walls, and let it fester. You don't just find these places on a map. They find you. One choice at a time, one loss, one excuse. Until one day you wake up and you're not camping anymore. You're remembering. Endlessly. Without escape. Without forgiveness. I stood at the center of Eden's lot, surrounded by 10 stone circles, and I did the only thing I hadn't done since this started. I spoke her name, out loud. I'm sorry, Katie. It was the first time I'd said it and meant it, not out of obligation, not to make the ache go away, just because it was true. And the wind changed, warm at first, then gentle, then gone. The mirrors stopped cracking, the sky began to lighten, and the ground let go. I don't remember getting back into the RV, but when I opened my eyes, I was parked at a rest stop outside Gallup. Sun rising, coffee machines humming inside the building, people laughing, kids running toward vending machines, normal life. Like nothing had happened, only I knew it had. Because for the first time in months, the cabinet didn't knock, the mirrors didn't lie, and I felt something I hadn't felt since I left that first campground. Empty. But not in a bad way, like something had been poured out of me. Something old, something venomous, something that didn't belong to the road or the RV or even the desert. It had belonged to me, and now I'd left it behind, somewhere in the dust and silence of America's forgotten places. I kept driving after that, but not aimlessly, not haunted, not hunted, just going, 1 mile at a time. And sometimes when I pull into a new campground, normal, clean, full of life, I sit on the step and stare into the dark, just to make sure I don't see another version of myself staring back. So far, I haven't. But I don't kid myself. There are still places out there you don't come back from, places that wait. And if you find yourself drawn to them, if the road starts whispering your name in the middle of the night, just remember, not every campground is a place. Some of them are punishment. Some of them are you, and some of them are still waiting to finish what they started. Before we dive into the next exciting story, drop a comment below and let me know, what time is it where you're watching from? I'm curious to see where everyone's tuning in from around the world. I used to think the desert was silent. That was before it whispered my name. I wasn't new to camping. I wasn't some green city kid trying to play rugged. I'd lived out of my '89 Volkswagen Vanagon for the better part of a year by then. She was dusty red, worn soft by wind and time, and she carried the smell of oil and sagebrush and old coffee. Her name was Loretta. I'd been crossing through southern Utah, chasing red rock and stars and that addictive hush you only get out west, where the land breathes in geological time. I wasn't trying to find anything. Not in the spiritual sense, anyway. I just liked to drive until the road gave up, park somewhere quiet, and listen to the world settle. That was my peace. The canyon wasn't even marked. No name, no sign, just a rust-colored cut in the land I spotted off an unpaved BLM road about an hour past Hanksville. No cell service, no other vehicles, just sandstone and sky and a silence so deep it made you hesitate to shut your door too loud. I set up camp at the base of a canyon wall that shimmered with iron and ochre. There were lizard tracks in the dust, the kind of heat that makes your bones feel porous, and the wind, it moved funny. Not like wind through trees, more like breath through teeth. But I ignored that. I always told myself I was rational. I didn't buy into ghost stories or desert legends. Didn't flinch at strange noises in the dark. Most things that spook people out here are just wildlife, wind, or their own imagination. The first night was uneventful, mostly. I cooked some beans, scribbled in my journal, read by headlamp until the page started blurring. I left the side door of Loretta open so I could feel the coolness coming off the canyon wall. The moon wasn't full, but it was bright enough to bleach the red rocks pale and cast long, soft-edged shadows. Somewhere around 2 a.m., I woke up. No sound, no movement, just that icy awareness, that hair-raising kind of stillness your body notices before your mind does. My skin prickled, even under the sleeping bag. I sat up, and that's when I saw it. The canyon wall. It was different. I don't mean it had changed shape or anything that dramatic. It just felt closer, like it had shifted, inched toward me. I stared at it for a long time, half asleep, heart thumping in this dull, confused rhythm. But it didn't move. Of course it didn't. Canyon walls don't move. I chalked it up to sleep inertia, one of those waking dreams where the world's geometry feels off until your brain catches up. Still, I zipped the van shut after that, and I didn't sleep again that night. By morning, I had rationalized the whole thing. The heat, the silence, isolation, all of it plays tricks on you. I'd probably just shifted position and changed my perspective. But I also found something. Just under the van's rear tire, half buried in the dust, was a rock that hadn't been there when I parked. It was round. Smooth, almost perfectly spherical, like it had been polished by water, though there was no creek or runoff nearby. It wasn't just the rock that bothered me. It was the way it was positioned, like someone had placed it intentionally. Dead center behind my back wheel. I picked it up. It was cool to the touch, unnaturally so, like it had come from deep underground. I almost tossed it, but something about the weight of it, the wrongness, made me keep it. I put it in the glove box. That was my first mistake. I should have left right then. Instead, I did what I always did. I made coffee, sat on the back bumper, tried to shake the weird feeling crawling around the edge of my mind. But the more I sat there, the more I realized how utterly silent the canyon was. No birds, no insects, not even wind. Just an oppressive stillness that made your ears strain for anything at all. That kind of silence changes the way you think. It warps time, makes your thoughts echo too loud inside your skull. I decided to stay one more night. Told myself I'd hike deeper into the canyon during the day, burn off the restlessness. Maybe I was just going stir-crazy. Happens even to seasoned campers. The hike wasn't long, maybe 2 miles in, but the deeper I went, the narrower the canyon became. The walls leaned in, shadows thickened. It got cooler, which was strange given the sun was high and brutal overhead. At one point, I passed a pile of stones stacked in a shape I didn't like. Not quite a cairn, more like a crude spiral collapsed in the middle. I didn't touch it. I just kept walking. And that's when I started hearing it. Not words. Not yet. Just rhythm. A faint thudding, far off and hollow, like someone tapping on rock. At first, I thought it was my own footsteps echoing weirdly. But then I stopped. The sound didn't. It continued, measured, deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. Always 3. Then silence. Then again. I turned around. There was nothing behind me. Nothing in front of me. Just the canyon walls, pressing close like ribs around a lung. I backed out, didn't run exactly, but I walked fast, didn't look back until I saw the open sky again. By the time I made it back to the van, my shirt was soaked, though the air wasn't that hot. I told myself it had to be an animal, maybe water dripping inside a fissure, something mundane, something explainable. But that night, the second night, things got worse. Loretta felt different. The air inside the van was heavier, like it was holding its breath. I cracked the windows, checked the locks, sat in the driver's seat with my flashlight across my lap, just listening. The whisper came at 3:17 a.m. Not loud, not sudden. It was almost gentle. Jesse. I froze. The voice was not inside the van. It wasn't outside either, not in the sense that it came from any one direction. It was all around me. It felt like it came through the canyon, like the red rock itself had shaped the sound and carried it to my ear. Jesse. My name. Twice. Slow. Careful. Like someone tasting it. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Every instinct I had, every cell in my body, screamed at me to get the hell out of there. Start the engine. Drive until the tires melted. But I couldn't. I was rooted to the seat, stuck between terror and disbelief. The voice didn't come again, but something shifted. The canyon wall, the one closest to the van, creaked. Not a rockfall, not a landslide. A creak, like old wood bending under weight. And in the silence after it, I swear to God, I heard breathing. Heavy, wet, labored, coming from the wall. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. Couldn't. I sat in Loretta with my flashlight off, hands clenched so tight they ached. I was afraid to turn the lights on, afraid to move, afraid the canyon might notice, because it didn't feel like I was alone anymore. It felt like I was being watched, not just observed, but studied, and not by a person, not by anything human. I waited until the first light cracked over the rim of the cliffs, until color bled back into the rocks and I could convince myself for a moment that the world was still real. Then I started the engine. She hesitated. Loretta never hesitated. I turned the key again, praying not to God, but to the machine. The engine coughed, sputtered, then caught. I put her in gear, threw dust behind me, didn't even bother strapping anything down. I just needed to get out. But I hadn't gone even a quarter mile before I had to stop. Something was wrong with the road. Where there had been a clean dirt track the day before, now there were deep ruts, like something had dragged itself across the path in massive sweeping arcs, the kind of trenches you'd expect from heavy machinery or an animal that didn't walk right. And worse, those same smooth round rocks I found under my tire, they were everywhere now, lined along the road like a crude necklace, in neat little pairs, sometimes threes, sitting dead center in the path like breadcrumbs from something that didn't want me to leave. The canyon didn't want me to leave. I pressed on, drove over the rocks, some crunched, others didn't, one cracked like glass, and that's when the knocking came back. But it wasn't outside, it was underneath the van. I killed the engine. Silence. I rolled the window down a crack. Nothing. Then, knock, knock, knock. Right below me, under the floor, centered, deliberate. I scrambled out, heart in my throat, and looked under the van. Nothing. Just dust. The drive shaft. A few streaks of what looked like dark oil, but no sign of movement. No animals, no loose parts. But when I stood up, the rocks had moved again. They weren't in the road anymore. They were around the van. A perfect circle. I stared at them, trying to make sense of it, trying not to scream. My legs were shaking. The sun was full overhead, but the light felt wrong. Too white, too clean, like it was washing everything out. And the silence was absolute again. Like the world had stopped just for me. I got back in Loretta, slammed the door, locked it, then something hit the side of the van. Not hard, not violent, just a soft thud, like a hand or a face. I didn't look. I couldn't. I backed her up, tires slipping in the dust, then floored it. The van bucked, bounced, rattled like it was being torn in half. I didn't care. I drove through the circle, through the rocks, through that dead air, and the whisper followed me. Jesse. It was in the vents. It was in the dashboard. It was inside the van. I drove for hours, didn't stop for water, didn't eat, didn't care where I was going, just kept moving. Radio off, windows shut, Every bump made me flinch. Every shadow felt alive. Eventually, I made it back to pavement. Civilization. A dusty gas station outside Capitol Reef. I pulled in too fast, nearly clipped a pump, killed the engine, then just sat there trying to remember how to breathe. The old man behind the counter didn't even blink when he saw me, just looked up from his paper and said, "You went out to the Whispering Canyons, didn't you?" I froze. "The what?" I croaked. He just nodded, slow, like he already knew the story. "You hear the knocks?" "Yes." He didn't smile, didn't joke, just poured me a cup of coffee and set it down on the counter without a word. I wanted to ask questions, wanted to demand answers, but something in his eyes told me not to. Not because he wouldn't tell me, but because I didn't want to know. I slept in the back lot of the station that night, too rattled to drive, too ashamed to explain what happened. When I woke up, I almost convinced myself it had all been stress, dehydration, maybe a heat stroke episode, but the rocks were still there. 5 of them, lined along the edge of my sleeping bag, perfectly smooth, perfectly round, and in the center, a spiral, drawn in dust, right where my head had been. I left Utah that day, drove east, took back roads, avoided cliffs, avoided shadows. I didn't camp again for weeks, slept in Walmart lots, truck stops, any place with lights and people and the sound of engines humming nearby. But even then, the quiet found me. Every now and then I'll hear a knock, in the pipes, under the van, in hotel walls, always 3. Knock, knock, knock. And sometimes when I'm almost asleep, when the world is soft and blurred and the night is thick, I hear it again. The whisper, not loud, not cruel, just Jesse, like it's still learning my name. I tried to move on. I really did. Tried to tell myself it was a one-off, some freak psychological breakdown triggered by isolation and heat, a stress response. Hallucinations from dehydration, maybe. But even in the daylight, that version of the story never held together for long. Not when I still woke up to rocks. Not when animals wouldn't come near the van anymore. Not when I could feel the air shift whenever I stopped for too long, like the canyon had found ways to follow me without moving. I started driving with the radio on 24/7. Nothing specific, just static, white noise, anything to drown out the whispers. But silence still found a way in. One morning in Colorado, I pulled over to make breakfast at a rest area near the San Juans. Beautiful place. Cold, high elevation, clear skies. I boiled water for instant oats, trying to convince myself I was fine, that I was healing. That's when I noticed it again, the spiral. Not drawn this time. Pressed into the condensation on the inside of my back window. I hadn't touched that glass in days. I scraped it off with my sleeve, breathing hard. Then I checked the outside of the van. Under the chassis, between the wheel wells on the rear door, more spirals. Some small, some enormous, some jagged, some impossibly delicate, like they were made with a fingernail dipped in water, and one carved into the dust on my license plate. I left without eating. That night I didn't stop. I drove until I crossed into New Mexico. Slept in the cab, key in the ignition, music playing. Woke up sweating at 2:13 a.m., engine still idling, headlights still on. Something was sitting in the passenger seat. Not someone, something. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The shape didn't either. Just sat there, like it had been waiting all night. No features, just mass and cold, like a shadow folded in on itself. I blinked, once, twice, gone. But the seat was still warm, and the air smelled like damp stone. I started crying without knowing why. Not big sobs, just tears, the kind you shed when a piece of your sanity slips out of you forever. That was the night I realized the canyon hadn't stayed behind. It had latched on. A piece of it had come with me. I started researching. Not online, not forums. I needed real words, physical ones. I stopped in Taos, found an old local bookstore run by a woman who wore turquoise rings and didn't blink when I asked about canyons that move. She led me to a shelf in the back, old books, dusty, cracked spines. Titles like Land Memory and Earth Sickness, Hauntings of the American Southwest. She told me something before I left that still claws at me. "You picked up a passenger," she said softly. "You can't see it, but it sees you, and it's learning how to stay." How do I get rid of it? I asked. She didn't answer. She just handed me a cedar smudge bundle, touched the roof of Loretta, and whispered, "Don't sleep near cliffs, don't stop in still air, and never answer if it speaks your name." I left that same afternoon, driving south into desert country, thinking maybe if I moved fast enough, I could outrun whatever I'd invited in. But you can't outrun silence. You can't outrun memory. A week later, I cracked. I was camped in the Organ Mountains outside Las Cruces. I hadn't heard a whisper in days. I was starting to hope, just barely, that maybe it had finally let go. Then around 3 a.m., I heard something knock inside the cupboards, right next to my head. Knock, knock, knock. Slow. Casual, like it knew it had time. I opened the cabinet, empty. I slammed it shut, climbed into the driver's seat. I didn't even grab my shoes, but when I turned the ignition, nothing. Dead, battery fine, fuel full, electrical all working. Loretta just refused. And then the voice came again. Not outside, not in my ears. In my head. "Jesse," I screamed, slammed the horn, beat my fists on the wheel until the veins in my hands burst like overripe grapes. But nothing changed. The whisper grew louder. It wasn't speaking English anymore. It was speaking in something older. A rhythm. A pulse. A sound made of place. And suddenly I remembered something I never should have forgotten. That rock I'd found under my tire on the first night in the canyon? It wasn't a rock. It was a tooth. I ran outside barefoot, cold gravel slicing my soles. I grabbed the smudge stick, struck a match, waved it in wild circles around the van, around myself. The cedar caught flame. Smoke filled my lungs. And for the first time in weeks, the whisper stopped. The air moved. The stillness broke. Loretta's engine turned over without hesitation, and I drove until dawn. I don't remember most of the drive. I just remember the way the sky looked in the rearview mirror. Too low, too dark, like something enormous was crawling backward into the horizon, sinking into the rocks like it had never been there at all. But it had. And it still was. I wish I could tell you that was the end, that the smoke cleared something from me, that I left that campsite and never looked back, that the whisper stayed buried in the rocks where it belonged. But that's not how these things work. You don't walk into a place like that and come out clean. I kept moving, of course. That's what you do in a van, right? You chase horizon lines and dry roads. You keep the wheels spinning until your nerves settle and your mind folds the fear into something manageable. But this one didn't fold. It stayed sharp. It stayed alive. And no matter how many miles I put between me and that canyon, something kept looking back. For weeks, I avoided cliffs. I slept in open valleys, never parked too close to boulders or canyons or anything older than human memory. I kept a fire going, even in places where I wasn't supposed to. I let the flame burn low, watching the smoke curl up like it knew what it was protecting me from. The rocks stopped showing up for a while, the spirals faded, but the dreams didn't. In one of them, I was back in the canyon, not camping, but buried under the stone, eyes open, still breathing. And above me, I could hear the voice, not whispering now, but humming, a low, ancient sound, like wind through a hollow skull. And I understood somehow that this thing had been here long before language, before names, before the first trail was carved across the desert. It didn't hate me. It didn't want to kill me. It wanted me to understand it, to carry it. And I think in some way I did. I started noticing little changes. Smaller animals wouldn't come near me. Lizards would freeze up when I passed. Dogs growled, not at me, but at something around me. And I swear I could feel the temperature drop sometimes when I walked barefoot in the sand. Once, in a quiet town in West Texas, I stopped at a laundromat, left Loretta running while I grabbed a drink. When I came back, there were rocks on the passenger seat. Not placed, not thrown, just there. As if they had risen from the fabric itself, I dumped them, drove 4 hours to nowhere, parked in the open, no rocks for miles. I woke up and they were back. 4 of them, 1 for each wheel, and 1 in my boot. I wanted to scream, but there was no one to hear it. I've learned something about silence, by the way. It's not the absence of noise. It's a presence, a texture. a weight pressing against your eardrums like altitude sickness, like the canyon had learned how to stretch itself thin across states, across time, so it could follow me instead of waiting for others to come. The real horror, I've realized, wasn't what I saw that night. It's what I brought back. And now, everywhere I go, I hear things shift. Walls settle in a rhythm that sounds familiar. Winds carry words I don't want to translate. And sometimes, when I drive through long stretches of nowhere, I'll look in the mirror and swear I see the canyon in the distance again, but closer this time. Following. I talked to someone in Arizona, a Navajo man who ran a roadside stand out near Window Rock. I didn't tell him everything, just enough to make him go quiet. He said there are places that don't just remember things, they repeat them. Echoes that become loops. Paths that aren't roads, but rituals. He told me if I'd stepped into one of those places and walked out, then something might have used me as a key, a way back into the world. That some canyons aren't carved by water or wind. Some are carved by hunger. He gave me sage, told me to keep moving, but not too fast. Sometimes, he said, if you move too fast, it can't keep up, and that makes it mad enough to change the land. And then he looked at Loretta, really looked at her, and asked, "Is that door always open?" I turned. The sliding door was open 3 inches. I hadn't touched it, neither had he, and we were in the middle of a parking lot. I left without saying goodbye. Somewhere around the border of New Mexico and Oklahoma, I started talking to the van. Out loud. Not out of fear, but because I needed something to answer back. And sometimes it did. Not in words, but in clicks, in creaks, in knocks beneath the floorboards when I asked things I already knew the answer to. I started asking her questions at night. Are we safe? Knock, knock. Is it still following? Knock, knock, knock. Do you want me to go back? Silence. Always silence. Until I'd start driving again. Then the engine would purr like it used to. Like she understood that moving was the only thing keeping me from folding into something the canyon could understand. I've started marking time differently. Not in days or miles, but in distance from the last spiral, the last whisper. I haven't heard my name in over a month. But I don't celebrate that, because I've started forgetting what my voice sounds like something else is speaking for me now. And maybe that's what it wanted all along. Not a sacrifice, not a scream, just a host. A warm, wandering soul to carry its rhythm across places it couldn't reach on its own. To remind the world that not all canyons stay where they're carved. Some walk, some wait, and some learn your name. So if you ever find yourself parked beneath canyon walls, far from signal, far from sound, and you hear 3 knocks from underneath your van, don't speak, don't move, and whatever you do, don't answer. Because once you do, it knows you. And once it knows you, it never. Let story complete. I've always believed that if something doesn't feel right, you should listen. That voice inside your gut, the whisper you almost ignore, it's never random. Not out here, not in the wilderness, especially not in the Black Hills. I didn't used to be that way. I used to need proof. I needed a logical explanation before I'd accept anything out of the ordinary. But something happened in those woods that rewired the way I look at the world and at myself. That trip wasn't supposed to be anything special. Just a few nights off-grid, parked under the pines in South Dakota, chasing some silence after a year that nearly broke me. It was just me and my younger brother, Jake. I'm 38, he's 32, and we'd grown apart in the usual ways brothers do when life chips away at childhood closeness. Bills, jobs, people we fell in love with and then lost. But something about the Black Hills had called to both of us, like it was a place we needed to see together before the world pulled us too far apart again. We weren't new to camping. We'd both grown up pitching tents with our dad in the Rockies. And after I bought my Volkswagen RV 2 years ago, I'd driven that thing across most of the Southwest, always chasing some notion of freedom, some peace I couldn't find in a house with drywall and fluorescent lights. But South Dakota was new to both of us. And maybe that's why I missed the warning signs early on, because the hills there don't scream danger. They whisper it. And by the time you hear them, it's already too late. We rolled into the Black Hills mid-September, just after tourist season faded out. Most of the campsites were wide open, save for a few hunters and the occasional solo traveler tucked behind thick pine. We picked a spot deep off one of the forest roads, just east of Custer State Park. No cell service, no amenities, and no other campers in sight. It was perfect, or at least that's what I thought. The first night was quiet in a way that felt healthy. Stars above, cold beer in hand, a small fire crackling in front of the RV. Jake and I didn't talk about anything serious, just football, music, a girl he was kind of seeing but didn't trust. I didn't press. I was just glad to be sitting next to him again. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to this strange sound. Not a branch snapping, not wind. This was different. It was rhythmic, subtle, like someone dragging a stick across bark, soft, slow, back and forth. Just outside the RV, I lay there in the dark, my heart starting to race. At first, I told myself it was probably a porcupine or something scraping at the undercarriage. But it didn't move like an animal. It didn't scurry. It lingered. Then the stick dragging stopped, and something knocked, 3 slow, deliberate knocks, right against the side panel near my bed. I froze. Jake was asleep in the pop-up above. I wanted to wake him, but I didn't want to make a sound. Not yet. I just held my breath, waited. Nothing. No more noise. No footsteps, no crunching gravel, no retreat. Just silence so thick it started ringing in my ears. I lay there for nearly 20 minutes before I heard Jake stir. He mumbled something and rolled over. The moment passed. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I told Jake what I'd heard. He laughed, told me it was probably a branch rubbing against the side of the RV, maybe a raccoon. "You get spooked easy these days," he said, half joking. "City life softening you up." I didn't argue. I wanted to believe him. I needed to. Because something about the way the air had felt that night, thick and watching, it gnawed at me. We spent the day hiking out past cathedral spires, the granite peaks towering like stone ghosts. The whole place had this eerie stillness to it, like sound didn't quite behave the way it should. You'd hear a hawk cry and then nothing. No echoes, no rustling wind. Just a stillness that felt staged. We got back around dusk, made some dinner, drank a couple beers, and I tried not to stare too long at the tree line. The sun dropped fast, and with it, the warmth. Jake went to bed early. I stayed up, keeping the fire going longer than I needed to, just to have the light. I didn't hear anything that second night. But I felt it, like we weren't alone anymore. You know that feeling when you're being watched? Like something's eyes are pressing against your back even when you can't see it? I sat outside until the fire burned low, and I swear the woods were breathing. That's the only way I can describe it. Not just wind through trees. Breathing. Intentional. Measured. Waiting. I finally crawled into bed just after midnight, exhausted, but my mind wouldn't shut off. I kept thinking about those 3 knocks, how deliberate they were, how certain. The next morning, Jake was already outside, making coffee on the propane stove. He looked pale, eyes red. "You sleep okay?" I asked. He shook his head. "Weird dreams. Woke up like 5 times. Thought I heard you walking around outside." "I didn't leave the RV," I said. "I stayed in bed all night." He looked up at me, confused. "You sure? I swear I heard footsteps around 2 or 3, gravel crunching. Thought maybe you were checking something." I didn't answer right away because I'd heard it too, but I hadn't wanted to believe it. That day, we drove into town, Hill City, just to get a signal and check in with family. While we were there, I stopped in at a little general store, picked up some extra batteries, water, and a local trail map. The old man at the counter looked over my gear and asked where we were staying. "Forest Road 675, I said. "Near a big outcrop, maybe 8 miles from the main highway." He paused. "You boys alone out there?" he asked. "Yeah, just the 2 of us," I replied. He tapped the counter once, then looked out the window. "You ever hear of the wind cave stories?" I shook my head. "They don't talk about it much now," he said. But folks used to say there's things that come up from underground out there. Not animals, not people either. Just things. I thought he was just messing with me, trying to spook a couple of out-of-towners. He handed me my change and added, "Stay near your fire, and if you hear knocking, don't open the door." That night, the wind picked up. Cold, sharp gusts that rattled the RV windows. Jake was already in bed, headphones in, watching something on his tablet. I was outside again, firelight flickering against the trees. And then I saw it. Just past the light line, maybe 40 feet out, something moved. Not a deer, not a bear, something tall, thin, almost human, but off. Too long in the limbs. It stood between two trees, not moving, just watching. I couldn't make out a face, only the silhouette. But its presence hit me like a pressure wave. I stood up slowly, trying not to breathe too loud. The fire crackled. The figure didn't move. Then it stepped behind the tree and vanished. I ran into the RV, locked the doors, pulled the shades. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I didn't sleep that night either. By morning, I'd convinced myself I imagined it, that maybe I'd been tired, half dreaming. But the way my heart had reacted, the pure instinctive dread, that didn't feel like imagination. It felt like warning. Jake didn't mention anything strange that morning, but I could tell something was bothering him. He wasn't cracking jokes like usual. He just sipped his coffee, staring into the trees like he was waiting for them to move again. Around lunchtime, we went for a short hike, just to try and reset. I brought my hatchet. Jake brought his .22 pistol, something he rarely carried, even when camping. He didn't say why. He didn't have to. We stayed on trail, kept close, didn't talk much. The forest felt wrong in a way I still struggle to explain. It was like we were walking through a place that didn't want us there, like the ground itself remembered pain and was waiting to repeat it. About 2 miles in, Jake stopped suddenly. "Do you hear that?" he asked. I listened. Wind, distant birds, the usual. "No, there's something else," he said, eyes scanning the trees. We both went silent. Then I heard it. Whistling. High-pitched, faint, coming from somewhere ahead and to the right, deep in the trees. It wasn't a bird. It was deliberate, too rhythmic, 3 short bursts, a pause. Then again, it was the kind of sound that might have seemed harmless in a crowded park, maybe even someone messing around. But out here with no one else for miles, it chilled me to the core. Jake's hand went to his pistol instinctively. "Could be another camper?" I offered weakly. He shook his head. "Then where's their car? Their fire? We haven't seen a single person since we got here." The whistling stopped. We waited, frozen. Then came the sound of footsteps, quick, crunching ones, moving fast through the underbrush, circling from the right to behind us. We spun around, backs to each other now, scanning the woods. Nothing. No figure. No movement. Just the weight of being watched. Heavy, suffocating. We didn't speak again until we were halfway back to camp. That evening, Jake said something I didn't expect. "I think we should leave." I nodded. First light. But deep down, I wasn't sure that was early enough. That night, I made a mistake I still regret. I left the campfire burning, thinking it would keep animals away. I thought the light might help, like it had the past 2 nights. I didn't want to sit outside again. I couldn't. Something about the way the forest moved when I looked too long, it made my stomach turn. I locked the RV, bolted every latch, even pushed one of the camp chairs under the door handle. I climbed into bed fully clothed, boots on, flashlight in hand. But I didn't sleep. Neither did Jake. At 2:13 a.m., I'll never forget that time, I woke to the sound of something brushing along the RV's side, not dragging like before. This was more like tapping, light, curious, tap, tap, tap. I held my breath, then it changed. The tapping moved to the door, and then, clear as day, 3 knocks, just like before, deliberate, human. Jake sat up above me. "You hear that?" "Yeah," I whispered. We both waited, silent, straining to hear. Then something began to whisper, right outside the door. Not words, not in English. Just this sick, breathy sound, like wind through teeth, but with intention, with voice. Jake reached for his pistol. I reached for the flashlight. And then something tugged the handle, not lightly, not like an animal might paw at it. It yanked it, hard, like it was testing the lock. I almost dropped the flashlight. Jake hissed, "We gotta go." But go where? The thing outside started circling. We heard it step around the vehicle, slow, heavy, then silence. I peeked through the tiny crack between the curtain and the window. There was a shape. Not a person, something taller, arms too long, shoulders narrow, like someone had stretched a man until the body didn't make sense anymore. And its face, if you could call it that, was wrong. Pale, smooth, no eyes I could see, like just a suggestion of features. It stood there, head tilted at a sick angle like it was listening to us breathe, and then it smiled. I don't know how I saw that through the glass, but I did. I saw its lips peel back, wide, too wide, like a slit opening along flesh. It raised one long finger, pressed it against the window. Shh! I fell backward into the kitchenette. Jake cursed, aimed the pistol toward the window, but didn't fire. Then, just as suddenly as it had come, the figure stepped backward into the dark. Gone. The woods were dead quiet. We didn't sleep. We didn't speak. We sat there until the sky started to turn gray. At dawn, we packed up in silence. Jake didn't even eat. Just pulled in the awning, grabbed the gear, and we bolted. But the forest didn't want us to leave. 2 miles down the forest road, we hit something. Not a deer, not a tree. Something huge, something that stood in the middle of the path and stared. It looked human, but again, off. Like it was wearing a man's body like a costume. Skin stretched too tight, movements too smooth, like it floated more than walked. Jake slammed the brakes and we both screamed. But when we blinked, it was gone. No impact, no damage, nothing on the road, just dust and silence. We didn't talk the rest of the drive out, didn't even play music, just drove until we hit the highway. And even then, we didn't feel safe. Not really. We stayed at a hotel in Rapid City that night, a cheap one, nothing fancy. But for the first time in days, we had walls and lights and locks that felt like they might hold. Jake didn't sleep much, neither did I. In the morning, he showed me something on his phone. He'd started Googling. Turns out we weren't the first ones to experience something strange out there. People had been going missing in the Black Hills for decades. Hikers, campers, hunters. Some were found, most weren't. Some of the recovered ones were changed. One guy walked 17 miles barefoot, clothes torn, muttering about things underground. Another girl showed up at her family's cabin 6 days after vanishing, silent, staring, unable to explain where she'd been. She'd aged, they said. Her hair had gone gray. She was 23. No one talks about it. The official stories always blame animals, exposure, accidents. But there's a pattern, the same signs. Knocking, whistling, figures just outside the firelight. And every time, the woods don't just hide them, they absorb them. I don't know what we saw. I don't know what tried to get into the RV. But I know this. It wasn't a man. It wasn't a bear. And it wasn't something from this world. After we got home, something followed. I didn't want to believe it at first. I clung to logic, to routine, to the idea that if I just ignored the nightmares and shook off the tension, things would return to normal. But normal never came back. The first sign was the sound. That same whistling we heard in the woods, 3 short bursts, a pause, then again. At first I thought maybe I was imagining it, but Jake heard it too. In my driveway. In the middle of the night. It was coming from across the street, just beyond the old oak tree at the edge of my neighbor's lawn. We live in a neighborhood, not rural, not remote. Houses on either side, street lamps, sidewalks. But somehow that sound made it feel like I was back in those woods, alone again, in something's territory. We didn't talk much for the next few days. Jake texted me once, "You still seeing stuff?" I replied, "Not seeing, but it's here." Neither of us followed up. I began keeping my blinds closed. At night, I couldn't bear the thought of looking out and seeing something, some shape standing still on the sidewalk, waiting for me to notice. I started sleeping in my living room, not because it was more comfortable, but because I needed to see the front door. I needed to know if something tried to come through it. One night, maybe a week after we got back, I woke up at 3 a.m. and my front door was unlocked. I know I locked it. I always lock it. But there it was, not just unlocked, but slightly ajar. I checked every room in the house. Knife in one hand, flashlight in the other. Nothing. No broken windows, no signs of entry. But I swear I smelled the woods. Pine. Dirt. Rotting leaves and damp bark. That same dense, half-sour smell that had crept in through the RV vents. It clung to the corners of the room. It was in the carpet. The air. I shut the door, deadbolted it, then moved a chair in front of it, same as I had in the RV. I didn't sleep after that. That morning, Jake called me. He sounded shaken, panicked. He said he'd been having dreams, not regular ones. Repeating dreams, always the same scene. He was back in the forest, alone this time, standing at the edge of the fire ring. Only there was no fire, just ashes, cold, and there was someone or something standing across from him in the trees, not approaching, just watching. Tall, pale, lips curled wide, no eyes. "Do you think it marked us?" he asked. I didn't answer right away, but the truth is I already felt it, like something was tagged onto us, like a scent trail, a tether. Something was coming closer every night, watching from farther in the dark. Then, the worst thing happened. Jake went missing. It was 3 days after that call. I hadn't heard from him, but I thought maybe he was just laying low. His mom called me, said the cops had found his car, parked on a forest road outside Keystone, right at the edge of the Black Hills. Keys still inside, no signs of struggle. Jake wasn't with it. They did a search. Dogs, helicopters, rangers, nothing. I drove up myself. I had to. The second I turned onto that same forest road, the one we'd taken in, I felt it again, that pressure in the chest, that hush that doesn't belong in daylight. I parked where his car had been found. I walked half a mile in. Then I saw them. Boot prints, 2 sets. Leading off the trail, I followed. The farther I walked, the quieter it got. Even the insects weren't chirping. Then I found the campsite. But it wasn't one we made. It was set up, just like ours had been. Fire ring, a cooler, empty, but no gear, no people. And then I saw something that made my stomach lurch. Jake's water bottle, his canteen, sitting in the fire ring, melted plastic warped over black ash. I backed away, and that's when I heard it again, the whistling. 3 bursts, a pause, then again, from behind me this time. I spun, flashlight beam cutting through trees. Nothing, but the sound kept going. And then I heard my name, not yelled, whispered, like someone standing inches from my ear. Ben. I ran. I didn't look back. I don't even remember how I made it to the car, only that my lungs burned and my legs nearly gave out. When I slammed the door and turned the ignition, something knocked on the rear window. 3 times. I floored it. I didn't go home that night. I kept driving east all the way to Sioux Falls. Checked into a hotel, double-locked the door, left the TV on all night just to drown out the silence. Jake's still missing. The official report says suspected disappearance in rough terrain. The Forest Service blames bears. Exposure, the usual. But I know better. I saw the fire ring. I saw the melted canteen. And I heard him. Not a recording, not a hallucination. It was him, but something was wrong with the voice. Like it was being pulled through static, bent out of shape, like it didn't belong to him anymore. A few nights ago, I had the dream for the first time, same as Jake described. Me, in the woods, fire long dead, darkness deepening, and across from me something tall, something watching. Just like he said. I haven't slept since. It waits in the corners now, in the edge of my vision. I catch glimpses in mirrors, in window reflections, sometimes in photos I don't remember taking. It's always there, watching, smiling, waiting for me to come back. And the worst part? Sometimes, late at night, I hear Jake's voice again, calling my name, begging me to come find him. The voice started following me. At first, it was just in my dreams. That same distorted version of Jake's voice calling my name from the tree line, begging me to come back. I could almost see him through the shadows, but not quite. He was always standing just far enough away that his features didn't register. Just a silhouette. The silhouette. Just a shape. But then I started hearing him when I was awake, at the grocery store, in the parking lot, from the woods behind my house where there shouldn't have been woods. Little patches of trees I never noticed before suddenly felt deeper than they looked. Too deep for how far they stretched. The voice would come softly at first, always calling my name, always urgent, always alone. One night I stood by my bedroom window and heard it clearly, no mistaking it. Ben, right beneath the glass. I looked down, expecting maybe a trespasser, maybe some idiot playing a prank, but no one was there. Just my front yard. Still. Too still. No wind in the trees, no night insects humming. Just an unnatural silence that sucked every sound out of the air like a vacuum. Then the lights flickered, the same way they did that night in the RV back in the Black Hills. I backed away from the window. Something was outside, not walking, not moving, just standing, waiting. I couldn't see it, but I knew it was there. I knew it the way you know someone's staring at you in a room you thought was empty. That primal certainty, that ancient, cold sensation in the back of your neck that says, you are not alone. I started burning sage, leaving lights on, playing audiobooks through the night. I hadn't slept for more than 2 hours straight in over a week. Every time I closed my eyes, it came closer. Sometimes I'd wake up and the furniture in the house had shifted. A chair pulled out, a photo turned around, the front door, always locked, sometimes left open. Once I woke up to the smell of burning wood. Not fire, not smoke, burning pine, sap, that exact scent from the campsite in South Dakota. I checked every corner of the house, nothing. No candles lit, no stove on. But the smell lingered, clinging to the curtains, to my pillow, to my clothes. Jake wasn't missing anymore. He was taken, and now it wanted me too. It didn't want to hurt me. Not yet. It wanted me to come back. That's what I realized. That's why it was calling. Whatever this thing is, it doesn't take you like a bear or a mountain lion. It draws you. It lures you. It welcomes you. It gets inside your thoughts, your memory, your sleep, until you start questioning if you're losing your mind. Until you start thinking maybe you imagined it. Maybe if you just go back, you'll find answers. That's how it wins. It waits, it whispers, it lets you walk into its mouth. So I packed to run, not to hide, to face it. I'm not sure what I thought I'd do. Maybe I was finally losing it, maybe sleep deprivation broke my reasoning, but some part of me needed to know, needed to see for myself what happened to Jake. And some deeper part of me feared that if I didn't go back, I'd end up like him anyway. Gone without explanation, swallowed in plain sight. I drove through the night, no GPS this time. I knew the road, every bend of it burned into my memory. As I got closer, the pressure returned, the stillness, that hollow feeling in my chest like the forest was preparing to receive me. I parked in the same pull-off, same cold wind, same silence. I walked in. The fire ring was there, ashes piled high. I looked around. I didn't call Jake's name. I didn't want to risk speaking. That's when I heard the whistling again. 3 short bursts, pause. Again, it was behind me. I turned. Nothing. But then through the trees, something shimmered. Not light, not heat, like the forest itself was warping, like the air had softened and folded inward. I stepped toward it. The second I crossed through that invisible barrier, sound dropped away. Completely. No heartbeat, no footsteps, just an eerie vacuum. And there he was. Jake. Or something wearing Jake's face. He stood at the edge of a clearing, smiling. But the smile wasn't right, too wide, too empty. His eyes, they were hollow, like looking through ice, reflective, blank. He raised one hand and beckoned me forward, but I couldn't move. Something in me screamed to run, to scream, to not believe what I was seeing. Because that thing, it wasn't Jake. And this place, this wasn't Earth anymore. Not exactly. It looked like the forest, but the trees bent in strange directions. The stars above didn't match constellations I knew. The air didn't move the way it should. Time didn't pass. This was its place. Its trap. I turned and bolted back the way I came. Branches tore at my clothes, roots tried to trip me. The path folded in on itself, over and over. I had to trust my instinct. And finally, the moment sound returned. Crickets, wind, my own ragged breath, I knew I had crossed back. I didn't stop running until I hit the road. I dove into the driver's seat, floored it, and didn't look in the rear view even once. I haven't gone near a forest since, haven't camped, haven't RV'd. I sold the trailer, deleted all my travel videos. People thought I was just rebranding. but I know the truth. Somewhere out there, deep in the Black Hills, there's a place that doesn't obey the rules of this world, and it's still open, still waiting, still calling, and people keep going missing. Because no matter how many warnings, no matter how many stories, there's always someone curious enough to look. Someone who hears a whistle in the dark and follows it. Someone like me, or like you. So when you're parked at that remote campground far from cell towers and the fire starts to dim, when the wind stops and the insects fall silent and you feel that cold dread at the base of your neck, and especially if you hear someone you know calling your name, don't answer, don't look, don't follow, because it remembers you, and it's patient, and it's still so very hungry. You don't expect to see your partner cry in the rearview mirror as you leave a campground. Not the kind of crying that's loud or frantic. No, the quiet kind. The kind that leaks out of someone who's seen something they can't explain and won't say aloud. That's how I knew we'd made a mistake, parking our RV in the dark hills of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. My name's Colin. I'm 38. My wife, June, is 36. We've been on the road for almost 2 years now, living full-time in our restored Volkswagen Westphalia. We'd started out chasing freedom, sunrises in Utah, forests in Oregon, stargazing in the Arizona desert. But lately, something deeper had taken hold of us. A pull, a quiet hunger to explore forgotten places, campgrounds nobody talks about, towns people say are cursed, forests that don't want you in them. I think part of us wanted to be scared. But what we found in West Virginia didn't scare us. It changed us. We'd heard of the Mothman, of course. Who hasn't? The red-eyed cryptid with wings like a nightmare. The stories always sounded like small-town mythology, something to sell t-shirts and local lore. But when we passed through Point Pleasant that October, something about the place clung to us. The fog, the silence, the way even the leaves seemed hesitant to fall. And when we pulled into a primitive riverside campground called Salt Hollow, just outside the old TNT area where the sightings began, I remember June look at me and saying, "Let's not stay long." That was our first mistake. We didn't listen to the voice that whispered, "Don't." Salt Hollow was more of a clearing than a campground. No hookups, no cell service, just an overgrown gravel loop barely wide enough to turn around on, and 5 campsites carved into the edge of the forest. We took site 4, close enough to the river that we could hear it trickling through the brush, but far enough from the road that no headlights would find us. It was quiet, too quiet. By dusk, the air felt wrong. You know how sometimes in the middle of nowhere, silence can feel clean and peaceful? This wasn't that. This was the kind of silence that seemed held in place, like everything around us was watching, waiting, listening. Even the bugs didn't make a sound. The birds had long since gone silent, and every now and then the wind would move through the trees like breath, not air, like something alive. June made chili on the jet boil, and I tried to shake the feeling by playing my guitar, but the strings sounded tinny, off-tune, like they didn't want to be heard out there. At some point, I noticed June staring off into the woods behind me. Her spoon hovered just above the bowl, unmoving. "You okay?" I asked. She blinked, slowly. "Yeah. Just thought I saw something." I followed her gaze, but there was only darkness between the pines. "What kind of something?" She didn't answer. That night, sleep didn't come easily. The air had gone heavy, like the whole forest was holding its breath. I lay awake on the narrow mattress in the Westphalia watching the canvas walls sway ever so slightly in the wind. June was curled up beside me, but I could feel the tension in her back. She was awake too. It was just after 2 a.m. when we heard it. Not an animal, not a branch breaking or wind passing. It was rhythmic, a slow, deliberate thump, thump on the roof. June sat up, eyes wide in the moonlight, held a finger to my lips and listened. The sound came again, not footsteps too spaced out, more like something landing, pausing, then landing again. We didn't move, we didn't breathe, and then it stopped. 10 seconds of dead silence. Then something dragged across the canvas pop top, slow, like claws or talons. June whispered, "Colin, is it a raccoon?" "No raccoon's that big." We didn't dare open the door. I reached quietly beneath the bed for the small axe we kept tucked under the storage bin. Not that it would have done anything, but it gave my hands something to hold that wasn't each other. The scraping continued for maybe a minute. Then it stopped as abruptly as it began. No jump, no scamper, no wings. Just gone. We didn't sleep the rest of the night. At dawn, we got out and searched the roof. No prints, no scratches, just a thin layer of morning dew, undisturbed. I climbed up with a rag to wipe it down, just in case it had been condensation making noise. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been there, watching, testing us. We debated leaving. June was all for it, but I was stubborn. I rationalized. Maybe it had been a branch brushing the roof. Maybe it was in our heads. Mothman or no Mothman, we weren't going to run because of one weird night. That was my second mistake, thinking courage meant staying put. That afternoon, we walked into the woods near the old munitions bunkers, what the locals call the TNT area. It's where the original Mothman sightings were reported back in the 60s. Concrete domes covered in moss and vines, partially sunken into the earth like half-buried skulls. The trails were mostly unmarked, overgrown, swallowed by time. As we explored, I couldn't shake the feeling we were being watched. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't nerves. It was the kind of awareness you get when you know eyes are on you. Every time I turned around, I expected to see someone behind us. That's when June stopped walking. "Did you hear that?" she said, her voice dry. "No." "Shh, listen." We both stood still, trying to breathe as quietly as possible. Far off in the trees, a strange clicking sound. Not mechanical, organic, fast, irregular, almost like insect mandibles. Then silence again. We turned back. I don't remember walking quickly, but somehow we were back at the RV within 10 minutes. 20-minute trail be damned. Something about the trees seemed to bend around us, ushering us out. I didn't say it aloud, but I didn't want to go back in there. Neither did she. That night, we locked every door and window in the Westphalia, pulled the blackout curtains, kept the lights low. We didn't say much, just sat back to back, listening. The air smelled electric, like ozone before a storm. The hair on my arms stood up and didn't go down. Around midnight, it came again, not on the roof this time, from the woods, a sound that will never leave me, a low, reverberating hum, like a generator but alive. Felt more in the chest than heard with the ears. It built slowly from the distance, then came closer. Then, wings. Slow, powerful. The kind of wings that displace air in a way that makes your skin tighten. And then, tapping. Just one. Tap on the side of the van. Tap. One sharp, deliberate knock on the sliding door of the van. Not the fumbling claw of a raccoon. Not the brush of a branch. This was something with intention. Measured. Curious, like it was asking to be let in. June froze. I felt her body stiffen, her breath catch. We both stared at the canvas wall, as if we could somehow see through it. The air inside the Westphalia had turned cold, but neither of us moved to turn on the heater. Any sound we made now felt like an invitation. The tap didn't come again. Instead, the van began to rock, just once, side to side, like something heavy had pushed it, then waited. I grabbed the axe again, holding it in both hands, useless and trembling. We sat there, paralyzed, as the seconds crawled by. 1 minute, 2, 3. The silence was louder than any scream. And then another tap. On the rear window this time. I turned slowly, expecting to see something outside through the curtain. I almost wanted to pull it back. Almost, but I didn't. Somewhere deep in me, something primal screamed, "If you see it, it sees you." June whispered, "Do you think it's someone?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to be a person playing a prank. Some weird local trying to scare off tourists. But no person I've ever known moves like that, or hums like that, or waits like that. The tapping stopped. We waited until dawn again. Didn't sleep. Didn't speak. Just sat there surrounded by the darkness and that invisible presence pressing in on us from every side. When the first gray light touched the trees, we stepped out cautiously, like survivors after a bombing. The air was crisp, normal, but the damage had been done inside us. There were no footprints in the dew, no marks on the van, but something felt touched, claimed. June didn't want to stay a third night. I couldn't blame her. But something inside me, some combination of curiosity and pride, made me hesitate. I told her we'd leave after breakfast. I wanted to take one more walk through the TNT area, just one more look. She didn't come with me. I left around 7:30 a.m. with a flashlight, knife, and handheld radio. Told her I'd be back in an hour. She kissed me hard before I left. Not like it was for luck, like it was for goodbye. The forest swallowed me fast. The light in West Virginia is strange, filtered through mist and shadow, no matter the season. The air smelled of moss, rust, and something faintly sweet, like overripe fruit. I made my way back to the bunker trail, retracing our path from the day before. Only this time, things were different. The trails weren't where I remembered. Paths twisted in directions they hadn't before. Some were gone entirely. And the deeper I went, the more the air changed. It grew warmer, heavy with a kind of pressure I can't explain. My ears popped, my hands tingled, and the trees, God, the trees leaned toward me. Not like they'd grown that way, like they were listening. I found one of the bunkers, finally, dome-shaped, covered in moss, its iron door rusted but cracked open just enough to squeeze through. Inside it smelled like wet stone and decay. My flashlight flickered, just once, but it was enough to make my heart skip. The walls were covered in graffiti. Most of it was nonsense, names, symbols, dates, but one line caught my eye, written in charcoal above the entrance. "He sees who stays." I turned to leave and froze. Outside the bunker, maybe 10 feet away, stood a figure, tall, too tall, thin and still, with broad shoulders and long, folded limbs. Wings. I didn't see eyes, just shadow, but I felt them, hot and red behind the void, like coals pressed into the back of my skull. I didn't move. Couldn't. My flashlight dimmed. My limbs felt heavy, like I was sinking into the floor. My thoughts turned syrupy, disjointed. It wasn't just looking at me. It was in me. I could feel memories shifting, thoughts being plucked like strings. It wasn't malicious, exactly, but it wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was old, ancient, watching not just my body, but my mind. I thought about June. That's what snapped me out of it. I stumbled backward through the bunker door and ran. I don't remember the path I took, just trees whipping past me and my lungs screaming. At some point, I dropped the flashlight. My radio crackled but said nothing. I didn't stop until I saw the VW van through the brush. June was already outside, pacing. Her eyes locked on me the moment I broke the tree line. She ran toward me, and I grabbed her like she was the only real thing left in the world. "We're leaving," she said, voice trembling. I nodded. We didn't pack carefully. We didn't double-check anything. We just threw what we had into the van, started the engine, and peeled out. Gravel spit behind us. The tires screamed on the first bend. We didn't speak for a long time. It wasn't until we crossed the Ohio border that June finally asked, "Did you see it?" And I said, "Yes." We didn't say the word. Not Mothman, not creature, because whatever it wasn't about labels. It wasn't about belief or stories or warnings on forums. It was about presence. About being seen by something that shouldn't be able to see you. About surviving it, but I don't think we left it behind. The next night, we stayed at a KOA in southern Ohio, somewhere bright, somewhere packed with people, RVs, kids on bikes, dogs on leashes. It should have felt safe, but I couldn't sleep. I lay on my back in the van, staring at the ceiling, counting the whir of the fan blades, listening to the quiet hum of other families just a few feet away. I kept thinking about that figure, the one that stood in front of the bunker like it was waiting, like it had followed me there. It hadn't made a sound, it hadn't taken a step, but somehow it had reached into my mind and pulled things up I hadn't looked at in years. Fears I'd buried deep. Thoughts I hadn't spoken aloud since I was a kid. It knew my father's name. I don't know how I know that, but I do. And June, she wasn't the same either. She kept glancing at the corners of the lot, avoiding mirrors, flinching when birds flew overhead. She wasn't scared of the forest anymore. She was scared of the sky. 3 nights later, in a small Pennsylvania town, it came again. Not as loud this time, not as obvious. There was no knock, no shaking van, just a feeling like pressure on my chest, like I couldn't breathe deep enough. I sat up at 2:11 a.m. with sweat running down my back, convinced someone was standing at the rear of the van. I didn't look, I couldn't. And I knew if I opened the curtain, I'd see 2 red eyes glowing, not reflecting, glowing from the edge of the woods across the gravel lot. June stirred but didn't wake. She whispered something in her sleep that chilled me more than the cold night air. Don't answer. Don't answer what, June? The knock? The voice? The thing in the dark? I lay there for hours, listening, waiting. It never moved. But it was there. And in the morning, when I finally stepped outside, I found something waiting for me. 3 small white stones stacked carefully on the van's windshield, perfectly balanced, like a cairn, like a message. I didn't touch them. I swept them off with a broom and didn't say a word. Not to June, not to anyone. Some things don't need to be explained. Some things shouldn't be. I don't know how many nights passed before we stopped trying to outrun it. We went north. South, tried to lose it in the Rockies, tried to lose it in busy cities. But that feeling, that watching feeling, it never really left. It would fade sometimes, sure. Days where the sun felt warm again, where the birdsong seemed brighter. But then always something would shift. A shadow where there shouldn't be one. A hawk overhead that never blinked. A static buzz on the radio at 3:33 a.m. And June started having dreams. Always the same. She was in a bunker. Cold, damp, alone. And outside, something waited. Not trying to break in, just standing there. Watching. She'd wake up gasping. Sometimes crying. One morning, she told me she didn't think it was trying to hurt us. I said nothing because I wasn't sure she was right. But I wasn't sure she was wrong either. Whatever it was, it didn't act like a predator. It didn't chase. It waited, like it was studying, learning, becoming something new. Or maybe it was just always that way, and we were finally able to feel it. That was the scariest part. The thought that it had always been here in these forests, watching campers and hikers and travelers, but only certain people noticed. Only people who lingered in the wrong place. People who felt empty enough to be opened up. I started asking myself what made us targets. Why us? And I started remembering things I'd buried. My dad's death when I was 12. That time I left my brother behind during a lightning storm at summer camp. That time I thought I saw someone hanging in a tree outside our house, but I didn't tell anyone. Things I regretted, things I tried to forget. And I realized the moment it really found me, the moment it stared through me in that bunker, it didn't just see my face, it saw my shame. It saw everything. We avoided West Virginia for nearly a year, and for a while, it seemed like it worked. We got back into the rhythm of travel, stayed on the move, camped near lakes and deserts, far from the woods. We even started laughing again, planning. But something in me stayed fractured, and June, God, she tried so hard to be normal. She smiled and took photos and made playlists, but I could tell she was faking it. Every now and then I'd catch her staring into the distance, like she heard something I didn't. One night in Arizona, she woke me up with a whisper. It's calling again. I sat up, heart pounding. What is? She didn't look at me. She was still half asleep, maybe more than half, but her voice was clear, calm. The thing with wings, it's waiting for me. Then she lay back down and didn't say another word. In the morning, she didn't remember saying any of it, but I did. And 2 days later, I found another cairn, this one on top of a cactus outside our van. The same 3 white stones, perfectly balanced. We finally broke. Somewhere near Taos, New Mexico. The wind had picked up that night, howling through the high desert like it was pulling at the skin of the earth. We parked our van near a rock wall on BLM land, hoping it would shield us. I remember staring up at the stars, so bright they didn't look real, and wondering what it saw when it looked down at us, if it even looked from above. Because part of me was beginning to think it didn't live in the sky. Not really. Maybe the wings were just for show. Maybe what we were dealing with wasn't from up there, but from somewhere beneath. something that had climbed up. We were eating dinner that night, quiet and tired, when June set down her fork and said, "I think I need to go back." I didn't ask where. I already knew. She meant West Virginia. She meant the bunker, the trail, the hum, the eyes. I dream about it every night, she said. It's like it's not finished. My gut twisted. That's exactly why we shouldn't go back. But June shook her head. You don't get it. I need to understand what it is. I think maybe it chose us. Or maybe we were already broken when we found it. Maybe it's trying to tell us something. I wanted to scream at her, shake her. But she wasn't being reckless. She wasn't being dramatic. She was calm, terrifyingly calm. And I realized I wasn't going to stop her. So 5 days later, we crossed the border into West Virginia again. It felt like crossing into a dream you'd fought your way out of. The trees grew taller, the shadows came quicker, birds called from too high, too far, our van creaked more than usual. Things just bent in ways you couldn't point to. We reached Point Pleasant by dusk and parked outside town limits, away from the gas stations and motels. June had pinpointed the exact bunker where it happened. She'd written it down in a notebook, sketched it from memory. It was bunker number 12, east side of the trail loop, half sunk in wetland. That night, we didn't light a fire. We didn't talk much, just sat, breathing in the damp, watching the trees sway like they knew something we didn't. At 2:11 a.m., the same minute as before, I woke up gasping, not from a dream, not from fear, from sound, a low humming, not mechanical, not musical, a vibration through my bones like the earth was purring or mourning. I turned to find June already sitting up. I think it's time, she said. She was already wearing boots, her flashlight in one hand, her old green jacket zipped to the throat. She looked pale but certain, like someone heading to trial or confession. I grabbed my knife, a lantern, and followed. We walked into the TNT area under a full moon. The trees whispered things I didn't want to hear. The bunkers stood like forgotten tombs, half swallowed by roots and vines. Everything was still, except that hum. It led us, not forward but inward, like we were walking deeper into something invisible. The trail narrowed, then it disappeared altogether. Our feet squelched through wet leaves and moss until we reached it, bunker 12. The door was open, not cracked, not forced, open. We stood at the edge and I asked her one last time, "Are you sure?" She turned to me and smiled softly. "No, but I'm ready." Then she stepped inside. I followed. Inside was darkness, deeper than natural dark. My lantern barely lit a few feet ahead. The walls were marked with new symbols, scratches, black smears, chalk lines that curved and spiraled like wind patterns or topographic maps of somewhere not on this earth. And in the center, where the floor dipped down like a bowl, stood a figure. Not towering this time, not folded in shadow, but visible. 8 feet tall, wings folded like a cloak, head tilted slightly as if curious. The red eyes pulsed, not bright, just alive. It didn't move. Neither did we. And then, God help me, it spoke, not with words, with feeling. It pressed into my mind, not violently, but firmly, like an open palm resting on my thoughts. It showed me things I couldn't describe, memories I'd forgotten, moments from childhood, nightmares I'd never told anyone. I saw my mother crying alone in the kitchen after Dad died. I saw the look on my brother's face when I abandoned him during that storm. I saw myself, now, standing in this bunker with June, and I felt it seeing her through me. June stepped forward. 1 step, 2. The figure didn't move, but the hum deepened. She whispered, "What are you?" Silence. And then a thought, not hers, not mine, filled the room. Witness. That's what it said. Not guardian, not monster, not angel. And somehow I understood. It didn't come to kill us. It came to see, to record, to remember. But why? The images shifted again. I saw the forests burning, rivers choking on mud, cities crumbling, people forgetting everything, the old world, the truths buried in hills and trees. This thing, this Mothman, if that's what we want to call it, it wasn't warning us of death. It was warning us of ourselves. It had seen the fall before. It was the one who watched it happen. Not a harbinger, a witness to ruin. That was its curse. And maybe now, its purpose to share a burden, to share that burden. The red eyes dimmed, the humming faded, And without a word, it stepped backward into the wall, vanished, gone. No dramatic burst, no light, no scream, just gone. The air inside the bunker cleared. My lungs stopped burning. June fell to her knees, sobbing, not in fear, but in something else. Release. And I knew, standing there in the rot and silence, that we were different now. Marked, not cursed, not blessed, but seen. We left the bunker just before dawn. I don't remember the walk back, just the fog trailing off the ground like steam and the birds silent as if they too were stunned. There was no talk between us, no flashlight, no need. Something had changed, not just in the woods, in us. Back at the van, June climbed into the passenger seat without a word. I sat behind the wheel, hands shaking slightly, and drove until we crossed the Ohio border. She kept her hand on my arm the whole time. It wasn't fear anymore. It wasn't dread. It was something heavier. Grief, maybe. We parked for the night at a rest stop outside Columbus. Trucks hummed nearby, cars came and went. Normal life pushed forward like nothing had happened. But we knew better. We felt better. It had let us see something most people never do. And I wish I could say that was the end of it. But the real change didn't come until weeks later. We were in Minnesota, lakeside, watching the sun drop behind the trees. It should have been peaceful. Golden hour made everything glow. Families laughed in the distance. A dog barked playfully nearby. But June turned to me and said, "Do you still hear it?" I said no. I wanted to say no. But I paused, because deep under the wind, under the hum of insects and laughter and water, there was something. Not loud, not clear, but there, the same tone, that low magnetic pressure in the bones, like standing near a power station, the sound of being watched by something too large to see. I realized then we weren't being followed anymore. It was everywhere. Not in the way a stalker hides behind trees or a ghost clings to a person. No. It had become part of us. Like once we saw it, really saw it, it had no reason to hide. It lived in our bones now, in our memories, and in the things we chose not to forget. After that night, things began to shift, not in terrifying ways, but subtle. June started drawing sketches of places we'd camped but changed, deeper, darker, more ancient, trees with twisted roots that looked like veins, skies with spirals instead of clouds, and people always just barely visible in the background, watching. She said she couldn't stop. She said it was like remembering a dream from a life she'd never lived. As for me, I started hearing things in the static of radios, not voices exactly, tones. Songs with no rhythm, messages in the hissing silence when we passed under power lines or parked in dead zones. It didn't scare me, it reminded me of the warning of what we'd seen. And sometimes just before falling asleep, I'd remember that last moment in the bunker, the word it left behind. Witness, not run. Not hide, just watch. Remember, and tell. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm telling you. Because this wasn't about seeing a monster in the woods. It wasn't about a creature with wings and glowing eyes. It was about what happens to people who see the world without the veil. People who stop running and look into the dark and don't look away. Because once you see it, you start to see the other things too. The way some forests lean inward, like they're whispering to themselves. The way animals pause when you pass, as if listening to something behind you. The places your GPS refuses to track, those dead zones that don't show up on any map, even though there's clearly a road. You start to see that there's a rhythm to all of it, a pattern. And it's been there forever. They call it Mothman. But I don't think that name fits anymore. Not after what we saw. Because what lives out there in those woods, near the old bunkers and power plants and forgotten trails, it's not a man. It's not a myth. It's a memory of the last time, and now it's watching again. You might not feel it, not yet, but if you ever camp near old military grounds, if you ever hear a hum that doesn't stop when you turn off everything, if you ever feel like something is reading your thoughts, not attacking, just reading, then maybe you've stepped into the same rhythm. Maybe it's watching you. Not to hurt, not to chase, but to see if you'll remember, if you'll carry it forward, because the end never comes suddenly. not for civilizations, not for forests, not for people like us. It starts with forgetting, with ignoring, with looking away. And then when the fall comes, it won't be loud. It'll come like it always does, in silence, in darkness, under wings that don't flap, eyes that don't blink. But if you remember, if you witness, then maybe we'll get another chance. Maybe not to stop it, but to warn the next ones, because that's what stories are for, right? Not to entertain, to warn.